Hello, and welcome to the Business Standard Morning Show. I'm Ishan Gera, and here are the stories for the day. The upcoming assembly elections in 5 states seem to have derailed the government's plan to bring reforms through parliament. Not only did it not table any key economic bill during the just concluded winter session, but it also chose to scrap the three agricultural laws. Of the 26 bills that the government had planned to pass, just 10 were able to see the light of the day. The bill to regulate cryptocurrencies in India and another one to privatize two public sector banks were not among them. Let's look at the winter session from the point of view of the legislative work done.
The Election Commission officials kicked off their visit to five poll-bound states from Wednesday, the day when the Parliament's winter session was adjourned sine die. The EC visit is usually a precursor to the announcement of the poll schedule, which experts believe may be out early January. Meanwhile, as the session was in progress, farmer unions had intensified their stir against the farm laws. Most protesters sitting at the Delhi borders came from Punjab or western Uttar Pradesh, the two poll-bound states. And the bank unions were too up in arms against the proposed Banking Laws Amendment Bill 2021, which sought to privatize two public sector banks. Fearing for their jobs, lakhs of government bank employees observed a 2-day nationwide strike recently against the privatization bid. So, did the government choose a populist path when it introduced the scrapping of pro-reform agriculture laws and didn't table the Banking Laws Amendment Bill 2021? Experts believe so. The government also took a U-turn on the abolition of electricity subsidies. It has decided to withdraw the proposal from Draft Electricity Bill 2020, deviating from its plan to introduce direct benefit transfer in the electricity sector. The Electricity Amendment Bill was dropped at the behest of farmers as the government agreed to first discuss the bill with them before it is tabled. Not just this, but also the bill to regulate cryptocurrencies was not taken up. A similar bill was earlier listed for the budget session but could not be introduced. To be sure, there is still no clarity on whether the government wants to regulate the sector or ban it. Cryptocurrencies gained mainstream relevance in India in 2017, and 4 years later, regulations are yet to come. Another year has gone by with the Indian crypto sector still living with uncertainty. At the same time, the Election Laws Amendment Bill 2021, which enables the linking of electoral roll data with Aadhaar, was pushed through the parliament despite the bill not being listed in the initial business agenda. The actions raise questions on the government's immediate priorities despite its stated intent on economic reforms. The privatization of two public sector banks is unlikely to happen in the current year. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had announced in this year's budget that the government will take up this exercise. While it is not an easy task for the government, postponing it is unlikely to help. Business Standard's political editor Aditi Fadnas shares her takeaways on the winter session.
So many bills were expected to be passed in the winter session. The most important and the most contentious one among them was the Electricity Amendment Act bill, which was going to put in place a whole lot of reforms in the power sector. Even the supplementary demand for grants was not properly discussed. The appropriation bill was not properly discussed because the house couldn't run, the upper house couldn't run. And the sad thing is that it will now deemed to be passed because the Rajya Sabha does not have the right to reject financial bills. The other bills which were expected to come up were the data protection law, the cryptocurrency bill. We actually have no idea what the cryptocurrency bill contains and whether it's going to be referred to a standing committee, it's going to be referred to a select committee, we really don't know. So the winter session on the whole, from the financial business point of view, was well, it was a write-off.
The 18-day winter session of Parliament was also one of the least productive. Chakshu Roy, head of outreach at PRS Legislative, also gave us his views.
I think it's not a question of the government dragging its feet, but it's more of a question of how does the government plan its legislative agenda. If you look at the bills that were passed in the winter session, most of the bills that were passed were already in the pipeline of scrutiny by Parliament. So, for example, there was a surrogacy bill that was passed that has been pending in Parliament for some time. There was an assisted reproductive regulatory bill that was passed, and there was a dam safety bill that was passed. These bills have been in the Parliament pipeline for some time. I think one thing that the government needs to do is figure out as to what is the timeline in which they would want to pass a particular piece of legislation and then work backwards. So, for example, another bill that was listed during the session was an amendment to the insolvency code, which potentially would have dealt with cross-border insolvency. Now, that's also not come up. So I think the need for government to budget in time for externalities and then work backwards and say as to this is what we want to pass and this is the timeline that we want to pass it in, then that would be helpful in getting a little more certainty about government's legislative priorities.
Now, the fate of these key pro-reform bills is hanging in the balance. With the budget session just over a month away, we can once again expect these bills to grab the headlines. With reform bills piling up, it is high time the government turned decisive and stopped dragging its feet for yet another year.
Government's policies often impact the markets directly. From travel restrictions to ban on unvaccinated citizens from visiting public places, governments have been quick in their actions to contain the spread of Omicron. These measures have yet again hit the contact-intensive sectors, which are still recovering from the wounds of the first and the second waves of the coronavirus pandemic. On the bourses, the related shares have fallen like 9 pins in 1 month. But there's something that investors in these stocks can cheer about. Let's see what.
Just when the world thought it was slowly but steadily returning to the old normal, the new variant of coronavirus showed us the pandemic wasn't over. Not just yet. Omicron, labeled as the variant of concern by the World Health Organization, was first detected in South Africa in late November. And since then, governments across the globe have put up guards to stem its spread. Travel restrictions, limited seating capacities, and ban of unvaccinated citizens from visiting public places. Governments have been quick in their bid to contain the spread. And these fears have yet again hit the contact-intensive sectors, which are still recovering from the wounds of the pandemic waves. The sentiment resonated on the bourses too, where shares of companies involved in hospitality, travel, and entertainment have fallen like 9 pins in 1 month. Barring Lemon Tree Hotels, which managed to rise 11% during the past 1 month, all the key recovery-related players from the BSE 500 space tanked on the bourses. The shares of SpiceJet were the worst hit as they declined nearly 24%. Others, including Indigo, Mahindra Holiday, and PVR, dropped between 8 to 18%. In comparison, the BSE Sensex was down less than 3%. However, with the severity of this virus still unknown, the near-term outlook for these sectors remains in a limbo. Analysts, on their part too, remain watchful of the evolving situation, even though they remain optimistic on these players from a long-term perspective. For instance, Gaurav Dua, who is head capital market strategy at Sharekhan by BNP Paribas, believes the worst may be behind recovery-related players. Listen in.
If you have around 1.5 to 2 years of investment horizon at least, then these stocks do look very good. That is number one. Number two, if you see each preceding wave, the impact on their business has been lower, right? as compared to wave 1. In wave 2, these companies got impacted in terms of disruption in their business was lower, right? Same way, even if you have a third wave or this Omicron, multiplexes are on. So, and even if they close down for some time, it will be much lesser number of days. So, in fact, again, will be lower than what was there in wave 2. Okay. So, yeah. So basically, the worst is over, and as the economy opens up, the spending power, this income comes back, these stocks will do better. So we do believe that economic recovery plays are as a interesting investment theme. However, you need to pick and choose the right stocks and have an investment horizon of at least 1.5 years to 2 years.
Tech charts too suggest decent upside in these stocks post a considerable correction. Let's go to Business Standard's Abdul Bakar for more.
The recent correction in the benchmark indices have seen several stocks turning into a bearish sentiment. Among this bigger list, few are managing to show a recovery which, if sustains, then can see sharp upside and jump another 10% easily. These stocks are Indigo, SpiceJet, Indian Hotels, Orion Hotels, PVR and Inox. One can see formation on chart that exhibit accumulation, reversal from their last respective support, and few of them are ready to break out from the consolidation phase. Indigo can jump towards the gap down range of 2100 to 2050 levels, whereas SpiceJet is continuously witnessing accumulation around 60 mark and can easily bounce toward 73 and 75 levels. Similarly, hotel stocks like Indian Hotels, Orion Hotels are holding their respective support and both can see another 10% upside. Stocks like PVR, which is supported by RSI, is heading towards 1400 and 1500 levels, while Inox is trading range bound or maybe sooner or later likely to break out on upside.
Clearly, these stocks have become value buys after the recent correction and are expected to give solid return to investors if the economic growth doesn't get severely challenged by new virus variants. Coming to this week's last session, indices may trade range bound after 3 consecutive days of rally. Yesterday, the benchmark Sensex index closed with a healthy gain of 385 points at 57,315 level, while the Nifty 50 shut sharp at 17,073, up 117 points. Data patterns, listing and stock-specific action will be the key domestic triggers, while Japan's inflation data will be eyed on the global front.
After the markets, let us see what else caught people's imagination this year. 2021 will be remembered for new terms that entered the common lexicon, such as cryptocurrency, non-fungible tokens or NFTs, metaverse, and Web 3.0. While crypto became popular due to the returns it gave investors, Web 3.0 is still catching up. It seeks to decentralize the internet, taking it away from the hold of big tech companies. Let us understand what Web 3.0 is and how it may change the future of internet in days to come.
The current version of the World Wide Web, or Web 2.0, is characterized by social media platforms, which allow greater proliferation of user-generated content. This is a far cry from Web 1.0, which was all static and non-interactive, an entirely top-down approach towards information dissemination. Right now, 5 big tech companies, namely Twitter, Facebook, which is now Meta, Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon, control how our data will be used and where it will be stored and processed. Their algorithms decide the information that we consume, which has left alarm bells ringing. Now, Web 3.0, with its crypto, blockchain, and metaverse use cases, is being touted as a movement that will wrest back the control of the internet from the 5 big tech companies. Instead of a data residing with centralized organizations today, Web 3.0 would see it residing on blockchain networks and thus being owned by users themselves. It could be as simple as a user based in India and another based in the US wearing their virtual reality headsets and having a business meeting inside a virtual reality metaverse such as Decentraland, which is built on the Ethereum blockchain. They could then complete their planned business deal using their crypto wallets linked to their metaverse accounts. And that's that. Facebook realizes that this is the future of the internet, hence it's rebranding to Meta. Such is the craze around metaverse that people and organizations are spending millions of dollars to buy land that only exists inside these virtual worlds. But it makes business sense. Because in a future when people are going to wear the VR headsets and meet inside these virtual worlds for social gatherings, music concerts and art auctions, you need land here for advertising and events. However, as there are proponents, so there are skeptics as well. Twitter co-founder and former CEO Jack Dorsey has denounced the much-hyped decentralized feature of Web 3.0. He recently tweeted, "You don't own Web 3.0. The venture capitalists and the limited partners do. It will never escape the incentives. It's ultimately a centralized entity with a different label. Know what you're getting into." Angel investor and former CTO at Coinbase, Balaji Srinivasan replied, saying that Twitter's corporate and political incentives led to deplatforming and censorship, and that Web 3.0 could possibly be better. Jack replied, saying that Web 3.0 has the same corporate incentives, but hides it under decentralization. While naysayers remain, the Web 3.0 opportunity in India has already got venture capital firms excited. Early stage Indian VC firm Antler India has committed to invest in 25 to 30 startups in the blockchain and Web 3.0 space in the next 2 to 3 years. It plans to deploy $100 to $150 million in 100 Indian startups over the next 3 years, of which up to $50 million is committed to the Web 3.0 space. The fund will make a minimum investment of $250,000 and will come in at a pre-product market fit stage. This represents a marked shift from the status quo, where there hasn't been much early stage funding available for Indian crypto and blockchain startups. According to new research by the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum and digital currency exchange Crossstar, Web 3.0 can help India contribute an additional $1.1 trillion of economic growth to its GDP over the next 11 years. Digital assets like Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Algorand, stablecoins and other blockchains are the fuel of the future financial ecosystem and Web 3.0. Whether India will be able to harness the potential of Web 3.0 early on will obviously depend on the regulatory approach we take on cryptocurrencies. The answers to these questions will be found in 2022.
Apart from the terms like cryptocurrency, metaverse, and Web 3.0, 2021 will also be known as the year of pandemic, which made people cautious about their health and savings. Amid uncertainty in equity-linked savings instruments, governments saw savings schemes offer safe and assured returns. What are these schemes? Let us understand in this explainer.
Small savings schemes are a set of savings instruments managed by the central government with an aim to encourage citizens to save regularly irrespective of their age. They are popular as they not only provide returns that are generally higher than bank fixed deposits, but also come with a sovereign guarantee and tax benefits. Since 2016, the Finance Ministry has been reviewing the interest rates on small savings schemes on a quarterly basis. All deposits received under various small savings schemes are pooled in the National Small Savings Fund. The money in the fund is used by the central government to finance its fiscal deficit. Now, let us take a look at the different small savings schemes. The schemes can be grouped under 3 heads: post office deposits, savings certificates, and social security schemes. Under post office deposits, we have the savings deposit, recurring deposit, and time deposits with 1, 2, 3, and 5-year maturities, as well as the monthly income account. The savings account currently pays an interest of 4% per annum and can be opened individually or jointly with an initial investment of ₹500. The recurring deposit that pays 5.8% a year compounded quarterly matures after 60 months from the date of opening. It allows investors to save on a monthly basis with a minimum deposit of ₹100 per month. The post office time deposits are akin to fixed deposits. A minimum investment of ₹1,000 is required to open a time deposit. The 1-year, 2-year, and 3-year time deposits fetch an interest rate of 5.5%, while the 5-year deposit earns 6.7% per annum. Investments under the 5-year time deposit up to Rs 1.5 lakh further qualify for benefit under Section 80C of the Income Tax Act. Next, we have the monthly income account that matures in 5 years from the date of opening. This scheme offers income to the depositors in the form of a monthly interest payment, and the current rate is 6.6% per annum. A maximum of 4.5 lakh rupees can be deposited in a single account and Rs 9 lakh in a joint account. Under savings certificates, we have the National Savings Certificate and the Kisan Vikas Patra. The National Savings Certificate pays an interest rate of 6.8% per annum upon maturity after 5 years. The interest that is earned is reinvested into the scheme every year automatically. The NSC also classifies for tax saving under Section 80C of the Income Tax Act. The Kisan Vikas Patra, which is open to everyone, doubles your one-time investment at the end of 124 months, signifying a return of 6.9% compounded annually. The minimum investment amount is 1,000 rupees, while there is no upper limit. In the third head of Social Security schemes, there is Public Provident Fund, Sukanya Samriddhi Account, and Senior Citizen Savings Scheme. The Public Provident Fund or PPF is a popular saving option for long-term goals like retirement. It pays 7.1% a year and qualifies for tax benefits under Section 80C of the Income Tax Act. Upon maturity of the account after 15 years, it can be extended indefinitely in blocks of 5 years. The accumulated amount and interest earned are exempt from tax at the time of withdrawal. The Sukanya Samriddhi account was launched in 2015 under the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao campaign exclusively for a girl child. The account can be opened in the name of a girl child below the age of 10 years. The scheme guarantees a return of 7.6% per annum and is eligible for tax benefit under Section 80C of the Income Tax Act. The tenure of the deposit is 21 years from the date of opening of the account, and a maximum of 1.5 lakh rupees can be invested in a year. And finally, the 5-year Senior Citizen Savings Account can be opened by anyone who is over 60 years of age. It carries an interest of 7.4% per annum, payable quarterly, and qualifies for Section 80C tax benefit. These time-tested and safe mode of investments don't offer quick returns, but are safer when compared to market-linked schemes.
These small government schemes not just provide tax benefits, but also give good returns in the long term. That's all we have for you today in this edition of Morning Show. We'll be back on Monday with more news and analysis. Thank you for watching.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.